Good evening, everyone. We are back. Fish East Live, episode 9. Uh, the weather has cooled down. So, what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about some hardwater action that's going on right here on the East Coast. Before we go any further, my partner in crime for tonight, Mr. Matt Zito, joining us from Nova Scotia.
Hey, Donnie, how's it going?
How you doing tonight, Matt?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
Good to see you, man. Always fun to get together and chat fishing, even if we can't do it in person, because if I come to Nova Scotia, they're probably going to lock me up for 14 days. So I think I'll stay put here in Sussex, and we'll just do it this way.
Yeah, that's fine.
So before we get into the ice fishing, I'm going to embarrass you a little bit, but I'm going to give you a chance for some redemption. Our last episode was kind of our 2020 recap, some highs and lows of our season. We're talking about, our own personal highlights from the year. And you kind of forgot a pretty important one.
I did. I'm ashamed of myself, to be honest. So the highlight of my 2020 season was my daughter catching a striped bass. And don't ask me how I forgot about it. I made a post on Instagram a week before saying it was the highlight of my season, and when it came to the show, I don't know. I didn't think of it, but that was definitely the highlight. And it's just kind of a great story, that kind of the whole scenario of how it happened. Tell it really quickly so we can kind of get on with the show. But basically, we were in the Shubenacadie River just as the run had started. The fish were just starting to come up the river on their annual migration, and I had my oldest there, Mira, who caught the fish, and my middle one, Gemma, and they put a solid effort in. We were there for a couple hours. We had snacks. We had packed a picnic, and the action was super slow. I think there was one other fish caught that day, and we're about 5 hours in, and my middle child there, Gemma, she kind of slipped, got muddy, and that was it. Day was over. She was cranky, so we started to pack up, but Mira was kind of upset because she didn't get to cast and reel, because, we're striper fishing with bait, so it's out there. So she wanted to cast and reel. So my wife took Gem up to the car, and I said, yeah, well, I'll just give her a couple casts and we'll be up in a minute. So scurry down the bank, and I'm cast. I don't think we were 5 casts in, and I hear the drag, because before we had gone down, I threw the last gas bro we had out and said, we'll stick it in the thing and I'll go down. And anyway, here goes the drag, and I look back up, and the rod is cracked over in the holder. So we both scurry up the bank, give the rod to her, and, I'm helping her fight it and all that. And, we got it in, and, fish was almost as big as her. It was 35 inches. And, it was a really special moment, really proud dad moment. And then, I think the big takeaway for me, though, was having that fish there, and then, having to talk to her about it. Like, I'm always under the belief that whoever catches the fish, it's your decision. You want to keep it, let it go. Doesn't matter who you're fishing with. It might be catch and release guy or catch and keep guy. So I gave her the choice. Said, what do you want to do? You can release it and it'll go back with the other fish and live, or we can keep it, but then it has to die. And she wanted fish tacos on the way. She talked about fish tacos in the car. Are we going to have fish tacos? I said, well, if we got a fish, yeah. And so I said, listen, you want fish tacos. Here's the thing, though. The fish has to die. It's not going to go back in the water. Daddy's going to have to kill it, and I'll take it home, and we'll cut it up, and we'll cook it, and you'll have fish tacos. Or we have to let it go, and it'll swim back with all the other fish, and it will live. So it's your choice. I'm going to give it – you have to make the choice, but you got to do it quickly, because Daddy got to let it go if you want to let it go. And she was just staring at it blankly, and I could see her little mind processing it probably for the first time. Like, this is where the fish comes from this is what – when Daddy brings home fish, this is what happens. And she looked at me. She said, you'll make fish tacos? I said, yeah, of course. She said, okay, keep it, kill it. Yeah. And that was it. So I did. And I showed her the whole process. And, that was a good moment for me. She kind of realized, this is how it goes down. These things just, the fish doesn't just come out of nowhere. Like, it comes from a living creature. So I think that's important. I think it's important to let kids kind of make that choice. Don't make the choice for them. Let them. And if you decide to keep a fish, if they want to keep it, don't just throw it in the freezer. Take it home, clean it up, cook it, show them the whole process. Don't throw it in the freezer and forget about it, and, give them that experience. I think that was important. So that was my highlight, and I can't believe I forgot about it. And when I remembered, I was like, oh, man, I can't believe I forgot that. But, Oh, well, I got to tell it, so I'm happy now.
There you go. And I mean, that was a perfect teaching moment. And I can vouch for the fact that this man makes a mean fish taco. So, I can definitely understand why his daughter made the call to keep that striper and get some of her dad's fish tacos on the plate. So, but Robert Fish Izumi, happy belated birthday, Matt. Matt had a birthday this week. So,
thank you, Robert. Appreciate it, man.
he is having a belated birthday celebration. Cheers to you, my friend.
Yes, thank you.
And you mentioned not to let a fish go to waste, not to just catch it with your kids and throw it in the freezer and forget about it. Well, this time of year, you don't necessarily need the freezer quite so quick because they're not long icing up when they come out of the hole. So why don't we bring on our guests? And we're going to dip it. Well, no, I'm not dipping my toes in the water this time of year, but we're going to get this show started. We're going to break the ice with a little bit of ice fishing. So let's bring on first. Who do we have joining us tonight? Let's start with Ryan Anderson. Ryan was with us 2 weeks ago, I guess it was.
Hi, guys. Straight from Truro.
Downtown Truro, where
That's right.
6 million deer cross his yard about every day.
Every day.
Oh, yeah.
So next up, we have the first of two Nates joining us tonight. Nate Dewsome.
Hey, guys. Coming to you live from Larry UTech.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm going to be outnumbered by Nova Scotians tonight, but I do have one more New Brunswicker coming to the rescue. This is his first time ever joining us on Fish East Live. Nate, we call him Figure 8 Chapman.
How's it going, guys?
Hey, Nate.
So if we say Nate, people might get confused. So we'll try to stick with the Mr. Chapman or the Figure 8. So just keep everything straight. Thank you guys for being here tonight. We were looking for some educated, experienced. I don't know about educated because education is, a bit of a vague term when it comes to ice fishing. It's trial by error in a lot of cases. But we wanted some experienced ice anglers because I'm not going to lie to you folks. I don't know anything about it. I have been ice fishing once in my life, and that was sitting in a shack, going after some smelt for about 2 hours. And I'm pretty sure the only thing Jason and I succeeded in catching that night was a buzz. So
nothing wrong with that. It's a good day. Sounds like a good day to me.
Yeah, well, before we get into the ice fishing, though, I see Martin McNally asking one question. So how do emergency services find your house when your number's on the wall behind you, Matt?
It's outside too.
It's outside.
I got better ones outside. They're bigger, eh? These ones are too small, so I brought them in.
Is that just in case you forget where you live?
Yes, it is. That's exactly what it is.
Madeline says, I want Matt to say hi to me.
Hi, Madeline.
So there, Madeline, Matt has said hi to you. And for everyone who's tuning in and checking us out online, thank you for joining us tonight. Guys, let's get this party started. Mr. Chapman, Figure 8, you're in New Brunswick. The rest of these gentlemen are in Nova Scotia. So I'm going to start with Mr. Chapman. You are probably the most, I'll say, experienced ice angler I know.
Thank you.
How long is the list of target species? Let's start with what do you target specifically, and then what other species do you know of are available here in New Brunswick that you don't target or just haven't had the opportunity to?
Yeah, here in New Brunswick, I think a lot of people are usually looking for brook trout. Speckled trout, you can find them in small ponds. They're usually stocked. Another really easy target species is chain pickerel. Chain pickerel live in a lot of bodies of waters and lakes where we live here in New Brunswick, and they're fairly active in the wintertime. And they take a variety of baits. They'll take moving baits, they'll take spoons, they'll take gliders, jigs, dead minnows, smelts. We've even caught them on hot dogs before. So I mean, a good day chain pickerel fishing is fun, either open water or ice fishing. And we have a lot of multitude of species here in New Brunswick. Smallmouth bass are often the bycatch of what we catch in chain pickerel. There's landlocked salmon. We even have a few lakes that have lake trout that are targetable, and burbot. yellow perch. Yellow perch live in all of our lakes and bodies of water, and sometimes they're a little trickier to get them to bite. But if you have the right lure and a little piece of meat, sometimes wax worms or worms work really good. We have white perch. People have caught bullheads. I mean, sunfish. I've known a few people who catch suckers through the ice. I mean, the list goes on and on, really. It's just a
Okay.
matter of bodies of water that you're in, and you can find mainly all the species you find in open water you can find through the ice.
Okay. Like I said, I'm an ice fishing newbie. I don't know much about it. I know there was a significant number of lakes opened up here in New Brunswick last year that weren't previously open, so I didn't know if that opened up more species to people who wanted to get out and give it a try. Now, Nova Scotia, I know there's some difference in some of the regulations. What about the species? Are you limited to what you can target in Nova Scotia? Ryan, let's throw this at you. Are you limited to what you can target in Nova Scotia, or are you pretty open like you are here in New Brunswick?
No, I mean we're limited. We have a lot of stock trout lakes that would be either rainbows or brook trout, pickerel, and then your two species of perch, yellow and white perch. They're open in a bunch of lakes. This year they've opened up bass as well, so we're allowed to target smallmouth bass through the ice this year. And then if you go up to the Northumberland or up to the Bredor, you can get into the smelt. Sorry, I guess you can do that on the Atlantic side too. I haven't done it myself, but yeah, so you can get into smelt. There is opportunities potentially for some striped bass on Grand Lake, where we have a freshwater population of stripers. But I mean, that's about it. We do get some bycatch of bullheads and suckers and stuff like that on occasion too. But for the most part, it is pickerel, your two species of trout, or smelt, and I guess the perch. That's pretty much the extent of Nova Scotia ice fishing.
Okay, so you have much like New Brunswick, you have opportunities for open water that aren't necessarily there for the ice season. Nate Dewsome, I'll put this to you. And I know, Nate, you're a little newer to the ice fishing game, so I'm going to throw it at you and see what you say, or what you know, and if you have to bounce it back to Matt or Ryan. As I said, there was a significant number of lakes here in New Brunswick opened up last year. Still not every body of water in New Brunswick is open for ice fishing. There's bodies of water that you can fish it all year long or all summer long, but once ice is over, once their season closes in the fall, it's off limits again till spring. Is that the case in Nova Scotia, or is it just species that you have to be particular with? You can still fish any body of water you want.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of both, and I'll kind of use my lifeline here. Everyone, when they in Nova Scotia, when they got their license, should have got a hard copy of the Angler's Handbook. Sometimes Canadian Tire can run out, but if you go to page 50, it gives you a list, and it even breaks it down by county of which lakes are open in that area. So for us here in Halifax, it's a good looking list, and lots of opportunities right in the city. We got stock lakes, kind of like Ryan mentioned. The limits, I think the limits for chain pickerel are 100, for white perch, yellow perch, 25. For smallmouth, the new limits are basically broken down by region. So depending on what region you're in, they could differ. So yes, to answer your question, if you say you fished, let me think of a good example. Maybe Tucker Lake in out near Beaver Bank. That's one of the lakes that I fish in the spring and summer and fall. That's opens up April 1st, but I can't go there during the winter season, January 1st till March 31st, and fish it.
Okay, so it's pretty much the same idea as here in New Brunswick. It's limited to particular bodies of water. Some stuff is off limits in the wintertime. And, that's kind of what I wanted to get a feel for, because I know there are some areas where New Brunswick and Nova Scotia differ in their regulations. And, it was, that's part of what we're trying to do with Fish East, is explore these differences. And also, we're going to highlight the good stuff, but we're going to see what's the same, what's different, and give people an opportunity to educate themselves. So, Matt, I haven't had much chance to talk to you since we kind of opened up. You're definitely more of an ice angler than I am. why don't you start? And we're gonna give everybody a chance to kind of talk about this because everyone might use something a little different. But what's your basic setup here personally, and what would you suggest for a newbie like me if I was going to get into ice fishing and get out for the first time? What's the things I need to have?
Okay, so just starting before, like, just just like the basics you need to even start fishing, you need an auger. In Nova Scotia, I would say you can get away with a 6-inch auger. I use an 8 myself. Now, if you're in, I have no experience with this, but if you're in New Brunswick and you're into Lakers, I don't know, maybe a 6-inch wouldn't cut it. Might be too small. I have seen in the Bredor Lakes twice in my life where there was a trout hook that couldn't get through a 6-inch hole. Big brown one time, and I think a big rainbow probably the other time. That was the only time I've ever seen that. So you're going to need an auger, sharp blades. That's really important on the augers. I recommend having like some kind of like cleat on your boot so you don't slip. It's really important. And then when you're actually like getting into like, rods and stuff, like a medium action ice rod. And depending on what you're targeting, if it's perch, like 4-pound fluoro, even for the stock trout, 4-pound fluoro. If you're somewhere down like in the Bredor Lakes where there's bigger trout, maybe 6 to 8. Pickerel, I mean, you can run just mono or like a heavy fluoro leader or a titanium leader like I use. I use kind of both. It depends on the day. If the fish are being really picky, I'll use like a 15 to 18-pound fluoro leader. Otherwise, I'm running like a titanium wire leader. And I mean, if you're just fishing like stock trout, one of the most popular baits is just power bait, like that jar. And I actually looked for some. I don't have some, or I think it might be in the shed. But the jar looks like Play-Doh. That's really popular. If you can get your hand on some worms, I know here Bass Pro sells them. And some of the pet stores will actually sell night crawlers too to feed lizards and stuff like that. So you can get your hand on some worms. That's all you really need. You don't need much for the stock trout. A hook, a split shot, some bait. I've used shrimp before. Shrimp work good for them. You can get into like little jigs and stuff, but it's really not necessary for the stock trout. On the Bredor, I used to use like kind of like little jigging spoons or like these little, I got one here, the little buckshot jigs tipped with a worm or a minnow if you can get it. Yeah, I mean, it depends on the species, really. There's lots of different setups. If we pick a species, I can kind of narrow it down. But I think, an auger, ice picks, you need to have safety stuff with you, rope, ice picks, cleats for your boots. Those are kind of the general stuff you need to get on the ice.
Yeah, we're definitely going to get into safety here a little later on, because let's face it, being out on the water at any point in time can be challenging, even when the weather is good. But if you're out there when the things are frozen over, that can be literally life-threatening if something goes bad. So we're going to get into safety here in a little bit. Before we do that, let's go through the list. I'm just going top to bottom on my screen. So Matt, you went first. Ryan, you're next. What's your go-to setup on the ice, and what would you recommend for a beginner?
Okay. Really here, we've got two main targets through the ice. That would be our stock rainbow trout and then pickerel. So super simple. You really don't need a whole lot to target either of those species. For trout, this is your very basic light action combo. Stock trout around here are very rarely over about 12 inches. So you can see this thing is just an absolute noodle. Super sensitive for the trout. And just, it's actually a lot of fun when you hook them. So Matt mentioned power bait. If you're dealing with stock trout, there's no point getting all snooty about it. Power bait works. Super easy. 4-pound test, small split shot, and then a hook. And I will make the point that power bait floats. So when you're ice fishing, ideally you will put the smallest amount of power bait on your hook that will cover the whole hook. That'll allow the weight of the hook to keep that power bait down and keep it from floating back up into your line. But that's it for stock trout. Super basic setup. For pickerel, I like to stick again with a lighter setup. Again, it's a lot more fun when you hook a pickerel. You're not really trying to impress anybody out there, so you might as well have some fun. This is a medium light 28-inch setup. The difference between that trout setup and this one is that you can see that when I pull on it, I'm only getting the sensitivity in the end of the rod. I've got some pretty good heft in the back of the rod there, so that if I catch a 20+ pickerel, I can still handle it. As far as lures for pickerel, I've got 2 boxes of baits. These 2 boxes are everything I could possibly need for every species in Nova Scotia, and I probably have enough in here to cover me for 3 or 4 years. You really don't need a whole lot of baits. The one bait I will tell you that is I use 95% of the time, this style of spoon. This one here is a Johnson Splinter. It is that heavy casting type spoon. They're effective. This one here is a 1/4 ounce, and that's pretty typical. It works for your pickerel, works for your perch, works for your smallmouth bass. I don't tip anything on those. I just use them straight lure. For pickerel, I personally don't use a leader. I use either a 10 or a 17-pound fluoro leader, as opposed to, a titanium leader or a wire leader or anything like that. Super basic setup. The one thing I will tell you for pickerel, and it is the thing I tell everybody about pickerel, if you're set up in a shack and you're pickerel fishing, you're missing out on fish.
Yep.
Pickerel don't move at all. Like very rarely. If you set up for a day on a lake that has pickerel and you don't move, you'll catch 1 or 2 fish for sure. Something will move in eventually. But Matt was nodding his head because I know he read a blog I did a few years back that explained this. But when you hit the ice, drill a half dozen holes and fish each hole for 5 or 10 minutes at most. You will 90% of the time, if I catch a pickerel, it'll be within that first 2 minutes of drilling a hole. I've got a gas auger. I will drill 6 or 10 holes in a shot, moving along the weed line or wherever area I'm fishing with for pickerel. Drill those holes, fish them about 5 minutes at the most each, and when you've run through those holes, go drill 10 more. And just the lake's going to look like a dimpled golf ball by the time you're done. But I guarantee you will catch 10 times more pickerel by chasing them than if you just sit in a shack and wait for them to show up.
Well, there definitely seems to be 2 schools of thought when it comes to ice fishing. There is the shack crowd. They want to set up a pop-up, or they want to set up a fixed shack in one location and stay there. And then there's the throw everything on a sled and see how many miles we can walk today. I'm not quite sure. I kind of see the appeals of both. It's cold out there. You don't always want to be out there, out in the wide open, letting the wind beat on you. And, but at the same time, if you're truly looking to catch fish, the results I've seen from the people that are dragging their sled and drilling and making the lake look like a dimpled golf ball, as Ryan called it.
Yeah.
Now, Ryan, one question. That spoon you held up, it was a Fire Tiger pattern?
Yep.
Is it a pattern you're looking for, or just the style?
No, it's the style, that style of jig. So I've got a collection of them here, basic gold one. This one is beat to anything, right? Like there's nothing left of the finish. That's because I use it so often. No color on it at all, just gold. Silver and blue. Again, this one's pretty beat up because I've been using the heck out of it. I don't think the color matters. I think the only difference is whether you've got a silver or gold. I will switch between those depending on what the fish want. But it's that style of spoon, heavy. I fish deeper water most often, more often than I fish shallow at least. But it's that heavy spoon that drops down and I don't like when they flutter far out. I want them to stay under the hole where I can watch them on the sonar and stay on top of things. And like I said, you drop down quick on them and keeping that narrow window so you can keep the sonar on them and see what the fish are doing.
Very nice. Okay, Mr. Dewsome, as mentioned before, you're a little bit newer to this ice game, so I guess you're probably the guy I should be talking to about what a newbie should be getting in with. But then again, I've seen some of your setups in other species you've been new to, and you don't take anything halfway. So I'm guessing, like other species we've talked about in the past, you probably jumped into this head first, like you do the other species.
Yeah, definitely. Like coming from an open water background, a lot of experience fishing open water. I don't know what kept me off the ice for as long as it did, but I'm definitely happy I took the plunge. When I kind of started, definitely I would say having a friend or a mentor, somebody who's been out there on the ice, is an asset. But again, to echo what Matt and Ryan said, your basic setup. A lot of people when they get started, they're familiar with a spinning reel. So everyone knows what a spinning reel is. So a lot of people will kind of pick these up. That's the first thing that they're comfortable with. A medium action rod, the length, we can talk about and debate all day about length and action. And Ryan brought up some really good points. But something I kind of jumped into head first was these. It's a little bit of a different type of reel, but they're called inline reels. And what these do is they help a lot with the line management. So the spinning reels you'll find, and this is for both open water and for ice fishing. A lot of the time that fluoro or that mono, it wants to just pop off the spool. And that's where the inline, it's worth its weight in gold. It's great for line management. I think the first couple rods I got, I picked up and there's no, the thing is with actions on rods is there's no industry standard. So different brands you're going to find different actions. So a Shimano, medium is not going to be the same as a Daiwa medium, as same as an ugly stick medium. So you kind of got to play it by ear and just, I would recommend go to the store and actually hold the rod and play with it. So for me, I actually use this is probably my go-to for almost all species. So I believe it's a 27 inch or 26 inch, and it's actually considered a light. But like I mentioned, where there is no industry standard, this kind of feels more like a medium setup. So I really like that rod. But a medium light, a light, for your rod, again, to echo what Ryan and Matt said, you can use fluorocarbon. You can use braid. I don't know if I want to bring this up, but braid does work, but it does have its disadvantages on the ice, and it can freeze up and become difficult. As far as basic gear goes, you can get a gas auger, and it really depends on how much money you want to spend. If you're on a budget, you don't have to, your first auger doesn't have to be a battery powered lithium ion, $8,000 or $800 auger. It can be just a hand crank auger. Electronics, I know we're going to touch on that a bit later in the show. You don't need to spend a lot of money to get out on the water. As far as basic baits, similar to Ryan, I use a lot of, let me just grab some here.
Before you move on to baits, I just want to ask you real quick. Is there a difference in the rods for those inline reels, or are those inline reels still running on the exact same rods as your spinning reel?
Great question. So the exact same. So the reel seat, you can use a spinning rod or a spinning reel or an inline reel. They're both interchangeable. So you don't need anything specific. Don't be intimidated by the way it looks. They're actually very easy to use. And definitely, I would recommend, if you're looking for something a little different, give it a try.
Definitely. No, I wasn't. Yeah. I had seen some inline reels, but I wasn't sure if they were on the same rod or not. So let's give you a quick minute to go over the baits you were looking at, and then we're going to talk to Figure 8 because I've got a couple questions in mind for him.
Yeah. Again, so as like Matt said, you can go as basic as a split shot and a hook and put a minnow, worms, whatever you have. If you want to start getting into the actual little lures and baits, little buckshot spoons, I tend to gravitate towards, and again, it's just personal preference, more natural patterns. But I do have some crazy stuff, purples and stuff to kind of imitate a smelt on that one. And then something I've actually kind of fell in love with later in the season last year was little tiny, I guess you can call them tungsten or teardrop jigs. It's hard to see there, but as you can see that. So that's the Wonder Bread pattern. So you can get creative and fun. It really doesn't matter that much, the color and the pattern when you're ice fishing. And again, the tungsten, it is a little bit more expensive than your average jig head. And that's where it comes down to, what do you want to spend on gear?
Yeah, well, and I mean that's fishing in general. Doesn't
Yeah,
matter
yeah.
doesn't matter if it's open water or hard water. You know, you can spend as much or as little. I mean, a little trout rod and a bucket of worms is pretty cheap, but you know, $100,000 bass boat and multiple $1,000 rod and reel setups. You know, it can add up to more than what I paid for my house. So that's you know, it's nice to see. I mean, you guys in Nova Scotia, really, there's been a lot of parallels. You each have a slight little difference. Now we're going to get the New Brunswick perspective. Mr. Chapman, I'm going to pop you back up here on the big screen. And what's your basic setup, Nate? And you know, by basic setup, I don't mean some of the crazy stuff that I know you probably got hiding there with you. You know, where would you start getting someone out on the ice? If you were to take me out, which you keep threatening to do, what would you pass me to start with?
Well, we'd probably start off with one of these like little lipless rattle baits. You can use them in, they just drop them down and rip them up. They got a rattle to them. They're a little bit bigger size, but a pickerel will eat that. Or if you're fishing deeper water, like 65 feet, 45 feet, a lake trout will chase that up, as you've seen on the pan optics, that lake trout love to chase. So with the lake trout and normal trout, we also use white tubes. So you can get them like mini white tubes or just like your regular bass white tubes. Just pound that on the bottom, and when you see that mark, just kind of reel it up. And those trout, they love to chase it, and they'll chase that down and they'll hammer it. And for the burbot, we like to use something that usually has a little bit of a glow and a rattle. So this spoon has got a built-in rattle. Make some noise on the bottom. You want to pound that, get a little bit of silt, stir it up, and it's nice to glow so that their eyes aren't very good. Rattle baits, they come like, you can use your bass rattle baits, anything that sinks. There's different styles, different sounds. We put you on spoons.
You definitely seem to be throwing stuff a little bit bigger than our Nova Scotia counterparts are. I mean, these are significantly bigger than what the guys in Nova Scotia are throwing.
Well, it all varies. Like you can start out small and work your way big, or you can start out big and work your way small. They take these little flutter jigs. Those work good too.
So I guess what I'm learning is there's way more to this ice fishing. You know, as far as you could, like I said, you could spend as little or as much as you want. You can get pretty in depth into it because, like I said, I'm not lying when I say I know nothing about this. You know, if I let Nate keep going, we're going to sit here all night watching him hold up bait after bait after bait. I got to ask a question, Nate. Anyone who recognizes where your nickname comes from is recognizing that you are a muskie guy during open water season. Have you or anyone you know ever caught a muskie through the ice?
Not here in New Brunswick, I don't think. I think all the muskie guys are sitting home sharpening hooks and making baits. I've been trying to get them out on the ice, but they don't seem to want to come and try. But I think the lakes that we fish don't have muskies in them. The only place that you can catch a muskie is in the head pond or in the river. And you don't want to go on the river in the wintertime because it's not safe. And I've spent a lot of time on the head pond, and we only seen 3 people out there, and those are the 3 people I know. And in order to catch the muskies, you got to go where the muskies live. And no one ice fishes where the muskies are.
Have you ever tried?
Not yet. You had mentioned the bucket list, so that might be on one of my bucket lists, is maybe to target muskies through the ice. But I think we're going to need a bigger
Martin McNally wants to know, you think we're going to we'll talk about that later, because I think you've got a pretty good skill set for opening up a bigger hole. Martin McNally would like to know, are you set up in your yard, or are you actually out fishing?
Oh, I would love to be out fishing right now, but it's actually illegal to fish after dark, a half an hour after dark on designated waters, and other inland waters. You can stay 2 hours after dark before you have to tear down your shack. But I'm actually in my garage, and I thought I'd give you guys a tour of the ice shack, whereas I have to dry it out for tomorrow's ice fishing excursion.
Now, do you hand hold your rods, tip ups? Do you use some sort of? Because my understanding is, and the guys from Nova Scotia can correct me if I'm wrong, automatic setting devices, basically like jaw jackers, they're not legal in Nova Scotia. Is that correct?
That's interesting you brought that up, because I saw a post the other day that kind of said otherwise, and that I was always under the impression they were illegal, but I don't know if something has changed this year, but they were saying that they are now. I haven't confirmed that. I'll have to confirm that with someone I know in fisheries, but I've heard they're good to go. Don't take my word for it. Anyone watching this, don't go out and buy one, because I don't know. But it's just something interesting when you brought that up, that there was a post saying that they were. So I don't know if something had changed this year. I don't know. I haven't confirmed it.
Okay, so they can run out and buy them, just don't use them.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, they can buy them if they want.
Yeah,
They might make
it Brunswick, I guess, but
yeah. Well,
don't use them here until you get clarification. Best thing you do if
exactly.
anyone does buy one or has one is just call Inland Fisheries, call DNR, they'll tell you.
Exactly. When in doubt, that's always the call to make. Nate, you've got a setup in your hand there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so here in New Brunswick, we're allowed to set 5 lines. So you're allowed to have 5 lines in the water, and we usually use like automated flag systems, like tip-ups. So this one here is basic setup where it has a spool on the bottom, and it has a small, I put a swivel on mine, and you can attach a leader and bait. So when a fish grabs that, the flag goes up, you pull out the line, and then you have to hand line the fish. So you're allowed 5 tip-ups in the water per person, plus 1 angling line, which you can hold. Or if you want, you can have them in jaw jackers. I have a jaw jacker right here, which is kind of like a rod in a rod holder with an automated system. And you put it in the lock. You can kind of set it with whatever bait you want. You don't have to. You can use dead bait, or you could use spoons. And that line just sits in the water. And then when a fish grabs it, it sets the hook, and then you can fight the fish on a rod. You don't have to hand line them in, because some people don't like to hand line them in on tip-ups, but it's a lot of fun. Like, it gets you back to basics where you actually have to fight the fish just with your hands. You have no rod, you have no drag. It's just you and the line and the fish, and it's a lot of fun sometimes.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've never, obviously, as I said, I've never ice fished, but I had a reel go bad on me one day, and I had to hand line in I don't know, it was a 2.5 or a 3 pound smallmouth. So yeah, hand lining can get real exciting real fast, and I can tell you from that experience, 20-pound braid is hard on the fingers. Oh, what was I going to say next? I just kind of lost my own train of thought. There seems to be, as we mentioned, there's different trains of thought when it comes to the shacks and being out on the go. There's also different trains of thought on, am I just going to drill holes and search, or am I going to get a little more modern and use some electronics? I'm going to go right back where we left off. Mr. Figure 8, you're going to have the first word on this topic. What, if any, do you use for electronics on the ice?
Well, we use a multitude of electronics on the ice. We use basic flashers, which you can use from any boat that you have. You can just modify the transducer so that it sits straight up in your hole, and it gives you a really good idea of how deep the water is, where your jig is, and when the fish interact with your bait. The only problem with using sonars is that you're restricted to what they call like an angle of cone, which will only give you between 15 and 30 degrees circle. Depending on how deep of water you're in, you can only see maybe 3 to 5 feet underneath your hole. We also use underwater cameras from Aquaview, which makes it quite interesting because then you can actually see like bottom structure. You can identify rocks, beads, whether or not you're fishing like sand or silt, and you can actually use them, set them up in a separate hole and angle them at your bait so you can jig and see your lure and see the fish interact with it. Now, a friend of mine is actually a little bit more into ice fishing than I am, and
I find that hard to believe.
wait until you meet him. He actually invested in the Garmin Panoptic Ice Bundle system, and if you are familiar with what Panoptics is capable of,
Oh
so now
yes.
we're able to drill a hole, and we can set it on a horizontal plane, and we can scan the lake anywhere between 8 to 80 feet in any direction, and we can see where the rocks will change structure, where the weed beds are. We can even mark schools of fish. And so we can pace out 10 or 15 feet where the schools of fish are and drill on top of them and then set the scope so that it's facing downwards. And we have a 30-degree angle, which covers between 15 feet on each side of the hole. So multiple people can be set up alongside one another, and we can mark each one's jigs. And you can watch the fish interact with your bait, chase your bait, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I've used Panoptics often enough on a boat, but it sounds like for ice fishing, it definitely would take the ice fishing experience to a totally different level. So, I don't even know if anyone else is going to come close to. I mean, he touched on flashers. Any of you other guys, Matt, Ryan, Nate, have something specific in your electronics setup, something that you really like to do with your electronics, or something that you would suggest people stay away from, mistakes that people have made, or that a beginner may make?
I can make actually a couple of comments. We've been talking about how cheap and easy it can be to get into ice fishing. I can tell you the first flasher I ever owned was a Humminbird Super 60 from probably the 90s, maybe the 80s. I paid $26 for it on eBay. It was not the most accurate thing in the world, but as far as having a device out on the ice that will give you your depth and tell you where your bait is and where a fish is coming in, it worked. Wasn't great, but it worked. So, I mean, I had a $26 investment into that thing. So you don't need top of the line. You don't need the $5,000 Panoptics, although I'd love to have it, obviously. But yeah, the other thing that Nate mentioned there was, you can take the fish finder off your boat and use that. I can confirm, because I have a background in kayak fishing. I was able to take my old Garmin unit off of my kayak. I actually mounted it to a Tupperware. So a good sized Tupperware that fits your battery on the inside. So I had your typical sealed lead acid 10 ampere hour battery. Put that in your Tupperware, mount your fish finder on the top, and carry it around in a shopping bag. You do have to. I used a zip tie just to get the transducer to sit 90 degrees to the wire from the transducer. But again, no real investment because I already own the equipment. Just had to buy a Tupperware. So there's options. Obviously, I've upgraded now. I've got a Lowrance unit now, your super basic ice fishing sonar. But, there's plenty of options out there to try to keep it cheap. And, you got to get creative a little bit sometimes, but you don't need anything super fancy. Just being able to see the bottom, see your bait, and see if a fish comes in. It can make a big difference in a day, especially if you're sitting in a shack all day. You have no idea if there's fish underneath you, especially if you're stock trout fishing or something. Having even a little screen there to tell you that you're at least on fish, it helps with the motivation a little bit sometimes when you're out there sitting in a shack all day.
I was just going to say, you're saying that's if someone's sitting in a shack. What kind of advice, and like I said, I'm throwing this at all of you guys. Jessica says the Garmin Striker 4 portable bundle works great with the A-scope option. So there's another option, a Garmin Striker 4. Nate, I think you might know that girl. What if someone's going out on the ice without electronics? What kind of things should they look for if they're hitting a new body of water? Hopefully, in all honesty, if they're new to it, hopefully it's a lake, because odds are they're going to find a little bit safer ice than something like a river. But what should someone look for if they really are going to say, they just say to heck with it? I don't know anyone that's going, but I want to try it. I went and bought my auger. I bought my rods. I've got my baits. What should they look for? Without electronics, what's going to be their best option to find fish?
I can jump in there. So what I would recommend it's first of all, if you're going to go to a body of water that you're not familiar with, you're going to be, if you fished at open water, you're going to have a huge advantage, because you're going to have seen what that lake looks like, during the spring, summer, fall, and you're going to know where structure is, where weed beds are. And I guess the next thing I'll say, and it's a resource a lot of people I think they don't use enough, is Nova Scotia actually has a lake inventory website that has contour mapping of a lot of the lakes in HRM and in Nova Scotia in general. And that is a fantastic resource, because it can show you. It's not the most accurate map out there. And what I mean by a map, it's basically a bird's eye view of that lake. And if you were to drain it completely down, it shows what that lake would look like drained. So when I say contours, I mean drop offs. So, where it goes from 5 feet to 15 feet. And you're going to be able to at least get a general idea of what area of the lake, has that kind of structure. So I think that's, if you didn't have any electronics, I would start there.
That sounds like a pretty good idea, and I think Martin just had a decent suggestion as well. And I actually have heard guys doing this. Go looking for someone else's holes. Maybe you're going to open up a dud, but if you're literally going out blind, starting from scratch, it's not bad advice. I mean, someone else was there before you. With any luck at all, you found someone who knew what they were doing, and they're gonna lead you to some fish. So.
I can give a quick little tip here too. First off, with stock trout, don't worry about where you are on the lake. Generally, stock trout are moving so much. Just go find a spot on the lake and drill a hole. There's obviously more to it than that, but don't get too worked up about stock trout. As for pickerel, use Google Maps. Pickerel, they, even in the winter, if you can find weeds in the winter, you will be on pickerel. But if you don't know where the weeds are on a lake, go to Google Maps. Use that to find areas. If you've got a decent shot of a lake from Google Maps, it will tell you where your shallow bays are that may have held weeds in the summer. It will show you where weeds are in some lakes. You can look closely at Google Maps and see where deep water and shallow water is. But look for weed lines that may have existed in the summer, and go to those spots in the winter. And then drill a ton of holes, like I mentioned. You'll come across some fish eventually.
Obviously, when you're drilling without electronics, you're not 100% sure what's underneath you for depth. So if they're going, we'll use the pickerel example. If they've used Google Maps, and I mean, if I'm going out without electronics, I'm going to drop something down through the hole and kind of measure off how deep the water is underneath me after I've got it drilled. How deep should they be looking? If they said, okay, I've got Google Maps, here's the weed lines, so I've got the right area, now I need a depth. So what, in the wintertime for pickerel, what should they be looking?
To be honest, depth is not nearly as important as the weeds. I fish Shorts Lake a lot, and Shorts Lake is absolutely choked with weeds all year long. So in the winter right now, that lake is still solid weeds. I go to the edges of the weeds in about 12 to 13 feet. That's the deep edge of the weeds. I will go to the 4 foot depth of the weeds. And everything in between. It is completely dependent on where those weed lines are. And again, like I said, if you're in the winter and you can't find or don't know where the weeds are on the lake, go to the spots where the weeds were in the summer. Anything between probably 15 feet to 3 or 4 feet, you have the potential of finding fish. I personally have caught them as deep as 35 feet when I'm fishing for other species. So, I mean, pickerel can potentially be anywhere, but I would aim for, like I said, look for your weed lines more than focusing on what depth that you should be fishing at. Just do everything if you can find weeds, especially green weeds, you will be all over the pickerel in the winter.
Okay, that's good to know. 35 feet for pickerel under the ice, that would probably be pretty cool. I did see one other comment pop up there. Smallmouth through the ice. How would each of you go about targeting smallmouth through the ice? Mr. Zito, have you done it? And how, and if you have done it, how did you approach it? And if you haven't done it, how would you approach it?
I haven't ever targeted smallmouth through the ice. I've only ever seen one hooked, and we were fishing for white perch, and my uncle caught it. It was a 17-incher, and it was, I think, in 10 feet of water, and he just kind of dropped it down, and fish hit it almost instantly, and we thought it was like a record white perch, and here he pulled out a bass. So I don't really have much experience with it. I've been told that they kind of winter up in spots and don't really move. So if you know where they are, you'll kind of, if you can find them, you'll kind of have a good day. But as for like actually going out and purposely targeting them, I haven't done that. But up until this year, you weren't allowed to do it. Now, if you got early ice, there's some lakes here that are open until December 31st. If you got good ice before December 31st, you could still target them. But once January 1st comes along, up until this year, you weren't allowed to. So I haven't done much of it. I can't speak for the other two guys. I don't know, but oh, there's a nice one. I mean, bycatch. Sometimes you get them bycatch, but you weren't actually able to really target them until this year.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nate.
Yeah. So yeah, exact same thing as Matt's saying. It's just opened up, so this is fairly new. To all of Nova Scotia. And I for one, am really, really excited about it. So I caught that one. I was actually fishing for perch, yellow perch, white perch, and a mark came up on my electronics, and it looked a little bit bigger than I thought it was a pickerel. And when I got it up to the hole, it was pretty cool to see. It was very pale, and the eye color, you can see it's kind of, they look completely different when you take them through the ice. It's a really cool thing.
Yeah, that definitely looks very pale. Not smallmouth are known. We're going to jump over to Mr. Anderson here in a second. Smallmouth are known for being very lethargic under the ice, or not lethargic, but they're not aggressive feeders under the ice. I know a number of people I've talked to who have had the opportunity say, they've caught way more largemouth than they have smallmouth through the ice, but obviously a smallmouth will bite. So we're going to see what Ryan has to say about what it takes to get one on the line.
I have definitely targeted smallmouth. Like Matt said, we've got certain lakes here that are open until December 31st. So when we get early ice, it is my favorite thing. I go booting it out onto that early ice and go chasing smallmouth. First thing I'll point out is that I located smallmouth in like November, December timeframe through open water. So I'm one of those fishermen that's still out there when it's snowing out in the boat. I do it every year. If you know where the smallmouth are in November and December, they're already in their overwintering spots and they're not going anywhere. So if you've ever caught a deep water November or December smallmouth, you can go back there through the ice and catch them just the same. For a lake that I've never been to, or one that I'm not familiar with, or if somebody is looking for an opportunity to go chase them, if you're familiar with what I mean when I say the basin of the lake. So most lakes towards the deepest or certain sections of the lake, you're going to get that mud bottom area where there's no real structure. It's just a big bowl of mud. What you want to look for when you're looking for smallmouth is out of that basin, you will end up with points, shoals, differences in depth. You want to find one of those areas that has rock, usually some decent chunk type rock. So if you can find an area of the lake probably deeper than 25 to 30 feet, so I'm talking deep, if you can find an area of the lake where you can get a transition from mud to rock, that is an area you want to target for smallmouth. For example, I was fishing smallmouth bass on Grand Lake back in November. And I found, not so much in a basin area, but one of those areas where 25 to 30 feet, marking some fish, I caught a smallmouth. So if I get the opportunity to fish Grand Lake and feel like I want to chase smallmouth, I'm going right back to that spot where I caught one smallmouth back in November. And like Matt said, if you find a smallmouth in the winter, there are times when you'll catch one as a bycatch with perch and whatnot, 10 to 15 feet. But if you are targeting smallmouth and you find that basin area with some chunk rock and catch, a smallmouth, you're going to catch a ton of them. You might have to move around a little bit, but they're going to be in that general area. They are going to be absolutely tight to bottom. They are not coming up off the bottom. A lot of times you won't mark them on your electronics. They'll be in amongst the rocks and, like I said, completely tight to bottom. The jigs that I was showing, or sorry, the spoons, the Johnson Splinter spoons, that is literally the only thing I have ever caught a smallmouth on through the ice. Quarter ounce, heavy jigging spoon.
Fair enough. So realistically, at least for the Nova Scotia guys, targeting smallmouth is, other than some early ice, is a new thing for them. Mr. Chapman, we're going to touch on this in New Brunswick real quick because I know that's where Rob Langer, who asked the question, is located. And then I want to talk to you guys a little more about the species you're catching and how you're handling them through the ice, when you pull them through the ice. That's your go-to for smallmouth through the ice?
Usually, like what Ryan said, for smallmouth, you're going to find points that are transitioned from mud to rock. They like big boulders. They're looking, the smallmouth bass that I've encountered are usually towards the later part of the season, like in March, when things start to warm up a little bit, when you get those days that are above zero, when the ice is starting to turn a little bit slushy and you get the seep through, what we call a seep through, where all the sediments and everything comes down through the ice and everything's starting to release. Maybe you don't want to be out there when everything starts to release, but that's usually when we find the smallmouth, because they're just kind of waking up and they're hungry, and they'll take big spoons, and they're going to be anywhere where crayfish are coming out from the rocks and small bugs are coming out from the mud and crawling up on the rocks and getting warmed up. So it's one thing that they really like is the heat. So if you can find any place in the lake that has a little bit more warmth to it, like with rocks or maybe like a sunny side of the lake that the sun always shines on the rocks, that's a good place to look for smallmouth if you're looking for smallmouth.
Okay. Rob, I hope that at least gives you a little bit of guidance. I know it's not something a lot of people do, but, the opportunity is there in the right location. So, guys, each one of you has had some really special experiences on the ice. I know we've got some pictures. So, Ryan, let's start with you. We're going to take a look at some of your highlights, some of the pictures you sent us. Talk to us about the species that you target the most, some of the, what you sent us for pictures. And as you're talking about the species, tell us how you handle, what you do differently handling the fish in the wintertime versus in warm weather.
Certainly. We can start with stock trout. I personally, it is rare that I keep fish. I'll keep a striped bass once in a while through the summer, but in the winter, I will definitely keep a few stock trout. That's my daughter Summer. The thing I enjoy about stock trout fishing is I have one of those great big 6-man ice fishing tents, and the best thing about it is bringing the whole family out. Mm-hmm. So every year the kids go out, join me for a derby that is held out in Pictou every year. Probably not this year, but stock trout is just a family outing. It is literally my favorite way to fish, is to have the kids there with me. We can watch the fish finder and catch some fish. As far as handling them, they go right on the ice. We bring them home and eat them. They're stock trout. They're put there for that, and we certainly enjoy keeping a couple of them to eat. So they don't get handled very well, but we definitely enjoy eating them. Mm-hmm. There's a landlocked salmon. That is a fishing trip that I will never forget. That would have been around 2015, I think it was. The year we had probably a good 5 feet of snow on the ground right into April. The lake that I caught that fish on is not open for a winter fishing season, but it opens on April 1st. So that first week of April, I was able to go out on that lake where I thought I would be fishing for brook trout, actually. I can tell you I have a gas-powered auger that is damn near 4 feet long, and I was burying the auger and not getting through the ice. I had to actually use my foot to scrape away some of the crap on top to be able to get the auger to go down and break through the ice. I was on 4 feet of ice that year in April. That is the one fish I landed that day in 6 hours of fishing. Watching my electronics and not really knowing what I was doing, I completely lucked into it. But it was one of those experiences that you don't get the opportunity to ice fish in April. So Super cool. That there's a like 12 plus inch perch. That was pretty special. Again, I'd mentioned that you find the fish in November or December when it's easier to cover the water. I had found a school of perch on that lake late into December. And as soon as the ice froze up, I went back out and found the perch still sitting in the same area, and was on a healthy school of like 12 to 13 inch perch. Those ones were getting caught out of like 35 feet of water. So those ones came home with me to eat. I will point out, if you're planning on releasing perch or bass or anything like that, don't fish them more than 35 feet of water. They don't handle it well. Their swim bladders end up coming out of their mouths, and they're going to die anyway. So if you're planning on releasing fish, don't fish them over 35 feet. Normally, you mentioned fish handling. One thing you can see that I've taken lots of pictures of my fish. The ones that you've shown have happened to be ones that I've kept. But I will point out, I am prepared to take photos long before I ever get out there and actually catch a fish. I personally use a GoPro. You can set that up to take a photo every second. And I have it on a small tripod that I set on my sled. So that GoPro is ready to go. If I hook a fish, I can land that fish, get the GoPro set up, get some pictures, and get the fish back in the water within 20 to 30 seconds. That's the big thing with fish handling is, don't let them flop around on the ice if you plan on releasing them. I don't like building up their gills with snow and stuff like that. But also, if you do plan on taking photos, especially if you're out fishing on your own, just make sure you're prepared in advance. Have your pliers ready, have your camera ready and set up, and know how to take a picture if you don't have anybody there with you to do it for you. But especially if it's minus 15 out, you can't leave those fish out of the water. In cases when it's super cold like that, I personally don't want to stay out, with my hands bare out holding a fish and whatnot either. So if it's super cold, land your fish, get the hooks out, put them back in the hole. If it's not too bad, at least be super quick taking your photos. It's the biggest thing. If you're releasing a fish, make sure they get back in the water as quick as possible so they're healthy.
Definitely. And I mean, like I said, having never done it, I think this is all great advice, and I hope there's some folks that are picking up a few little tips along the way. Mr. Zito, I'm going to jump over to you next. Sure. I know you've had some great opportunities on the ice, and you and I have talked about it before. Why don't you tell us some any tricks you may have for fish care on the ice, and tell us about some of your special memories on the ice.
I think I'll speak about trout first, because one thing with trout or salmon or any salmonoid, when you're fishing is their protective slime coating. So even when you're ice fishing, well, especially when you're ice fishing, usually you're wearing gloves. So if you're going to handle a trout and you're not going to keep it, you should take your glove off, wet your hand, and then grab the trout. Because, if you take that slime coating off, what happens is bacteria can set in, and the fish will actually die from it. It'll just, it'll eventually just wear down the fish's immune system, and they'll get stressed out and die from it. So I always try to make sure that, I take the glove off, handle the fish, a quick picture. I actually had my phone set up on a tripod there, I believe. And, quick, that one I actually kept, so it didn't really matter. That fish there, I kept that one. That was one of those escapee Waikagama rainbows. But Ryan makes a good point. Be ready. If you're in a place where you're going to catch some nice fish, like you're going to, be ready. Actually, I got a pretty nice rainbow recently, and I wasn't ready. I had not expected to get a rainbow that nice. I thought I was going to get a couple little brookies. That's what I was told were in there. Maybe some smaller, the stocked rainbows, and ended up getting an 18-inch rainbow. So my buddy just had his camera out. I said, take a quick one, took a quick one, and down the hole it went. So be ready. But if you're going to release fish, like Ryan said, don't have them out very long. Don't let them flop around the ice. Their eyes are really susceptible to cold temps and getting damaged from the ice. So, I guess the same as you would any other time. Any other time you're fishing, if you're going to let it go, just, quick pick and back down the hole. Try not to let it flop around the ice. And, that was a nice pickerel there. I don't release many pickerel. I'll let the small ones go. You know, when I'm out pickerel fishing through the ice, like I'm looking for some fish to take home. Those are the fish I prefer to eat. So, yes, my favorite way to do them.
Once again, we're seeing the famous fish tacos.
Yeah, I got a few ideas in mind for next season, but I'll leave that a surprise for you.
Yes, well, we still got lots of plans ahead. Matt, while you're still there, I see a question from or a comment from Martin. Have any of you guys, and I'll start with you, Matt, and then as we go through the rest, we'll see if there's enough ice. Use your drill to cut a live well. You will fill it for short-term storage. Have you ever actually built a live well into the ice to keep fish in, so you could maybe get prepared to take a picture or anything like that?
I haven't done it purposely, but there's been times where I've been on the ice where you'll get some warm temps and all the snow will melt. So you're actually standing in maybe like, 4 or 5 inches of ice. I was actually on Penhorn once and there was two guys next to me and I got a fish and I was trying to get off the hook and it fell at my feet, but it was like flooded. And I had to like chase this fish around. You try to get this fish. And people were looking at me, people like walking their dogs on the trail. And I'm like bending down, like chasing and like falling over, trying to get this fish back down the hole. So that's actually a great idea. That's a good idea. I would be, I'm gonna try that.
Jason says it's not legal in New Brunswick. I know I've seen it done. So before you do it, folks, in New Brunswick, at the very least, check on the legalities because Mr. Wilcox says it's not legal, and I have a lot of faith in that man's knowledge when it comes to our fishing regulations. So I can't say 100% for sure, but if Jason has said it, I'm definitely going to look into it before I attempt it. So
if you're going to do that here, I think it would be to make a live well that would be for the purpose to take a picture because we also can't keep fish live here. You're not allowed to use stringers or anything anymore. So if I was going to do that live well, it would probably be for that purpose, like put the fish in there, maybe get my camera out or take a couple pictures, put it back in the water, take another picture, and then let it go. You couldn't keep it, you couldn't just pile them up in there and keep them alive. Yeah, if you're going to fish, you have to. So yeah,
definitely not keeping them there just to keep them alive for the sake of I want to. I'll hang on to this one until I catch a bigger one and doing that upgrading. Right. No,
yeah,
but if you have it by your feet so you can put the fish down for 20 seconds, grab your camera. But like I said, I'd find out for sure what the regulations are in your area before you go.
Yep.
Jason says a fella got fined while fishing smelt a couple of years back. So, like I said, if you have any doubts, check for the regulations in your local area, no matter what province you're in or what jurisdiction you're in. Don't go doing something that's going to cost you money and potentially your right to get out and enjoy the sport we all love. So, Mr. Dewsome, we've already seen your smallmouth through the ice, which I will admit was, I think, the palest smallmouth I've ever seen. Yeah. Why don't you tell us about a couple more special moments you've had on the ice that you sent us some pictures of?
Yeah, so last year it was probably only I think it was my second time going out, and I was with my fiance, and we went out to a local spot right around HRM in the Fall River area, and again, this was the second time I ever ice fished, and I had I think it was a little buckshot spoon, so something like that. I know we've talked about these a bit, and I had it tipped with some smelt, and it was fresh smelt seemed to be the hot ticket that day, and I had a big mark come up, and it was actually the first fish I ever caught through the ice in Nova Scotia, and it was probably about a 24, 25 inch chain pickerel. And it's funny, we're talking about, there it is there. Yeah, on the inline reel, so you can see there. Yeah, no hut, just a little stool. I was on about 4 inches of ice that day. And that's about my comfort zone, but you can even see the steel leader sticking out of his mouth there. So that's what I was using that day. And we were talking about safety and fish safety. And one thing about pickerel I find too is that's a little bit different from open water fishing is these fish come at you head first with their mouth open through the hole. So that's also something to be aware of. When you're out in open water, you can grab them by the tail or kind of pick them up under the belly or net them. which is what I would recommend for chain pickerel. So again, to anyone that's new to it, you know, bass and perch, you can grab them right by the mouth and pull them out of that hole. But with pickerel, you know, a lot of the times they're coming up with their mouth wide open, and if you're, you know, reaching under the gill plate to try and lift that fish out, just something to be aware of. You can even use the little, it's in my fishing office over there, but there's little, I forget what they're called, but it's just like a pincher, a lip grabber. That's something I was going to use this year to lift a lot of the pickerel out of the water. You know, because you don't want to get your hand in the business end of that fish.
Definitely not. Yeah. No, a lip gripper for pickerel, open water or ice is definitely not a bad idea. So, Mr. Chapman,
Yes, sir.
I gotta ask you before we go too much further. I'm going to ask you about a couple of your special memories on the ice, but I gotta ask you. I've looked at it a couple times, and I'm sure a couple other folks watching at home have wondered. What is that thing just over your shoulder?
This thing over here?
That thing over there.
That would be what we call an ice saw. So
Explain to the folks at home who normally think of ice fishing as, you know, drilling a 6-inch or an 8-inch hole. I know we have some video. Why don't you, before we see the video, why don't you give them a quick little explanation of just what that beast is for?
what that for is for cutting sight holes, so that normally we drill probably 3 holes in a corner, or 4 holes, sorry, and then use the saw to cut between the 2 holes or the 4 holes. And once the holes are cut through, you can push that piece of ice down and then underneath the ice, which opens up to be a biggest hole, which you can kind of use your discretion to how big that you cut it, depending on, you know, how many people are on the lake. Like, you don't want to have a massive, like, 4x8 hole, but I mean, a hole that's probably 2 feet by 1.5 feet or 3 feet by 1.5 feet. You can see well, like, below the ice. Like, probably we've cut in depths of probably 9 feet and been able to see bottom quite clear. And for lakes around here, that's quite good. And it's exceptional to see how your baits move and how the fish interact with your baits. And when we were fishing the stock trout, they almost wanted you to take it away from them. Like, they would chase it up, and I had a couple of them actually hit right at the bottom of the hole. I could have, if I had a net, I probably could have netted them right out of the hole.
Why don't we take a look at the video that we've got? It really would take your ice fishing experience. I mean, not only can you see, but you could, you know, if you were over top of a school of fish, instead of having one hole, you could put 4 or 5 guys sitting on a stool around this one hole and just sit there, you know, having a blast. I mean, your only risk, I guess, would be tangling lines, but
and the other purpose of the shack is that we have windows, so you can open and close the windows. And once you close the windows, everything in your shack becomes black, so that you can see down through the hole from the light from the sun that penetrates the ice. And one thing that we have to keep in mind is that we want to keep people safe. So what we do is we carry big sticks and branches out, and we mark each hole with a tripod and then a piece of ribbon, so that snowmobilers or people on skis don't go over these holes, because they will freeze solid enough that you can walk on them, but like for probably a day or 2 afterwards, that ice is only probably like 1 inch thick or 2 inches thick. So it's always good to mark your holes, even small holes. It's always good to mark your holes, because you're liable to just walk along, and if it's a popular lake, you could easily fall into a hole. You may not necessarily go in the water, but you could probably twist your ankle, or, you know, it can be quite dangerous if there's a lot of holes. So just one thing to be aware of, that when you're cutting big holes in the ice, make sure that you take into account for other people's safety and mark your holes accordingly.
I was going to ask you about that with those big holes, just if you did something to keep, because like you said, snowmobile, you know, snowshoers, cross-country skiers, you never know who's going to be out on the ice. So Do we have some video of that ice saw in action? Oh, I guess we've got some video of a release. Nate, why don't you tell us what we're looking at?
We're looking at probably a 3 by 3 foot hole, and that is probably 6 feet of water. We were fishing in a small little stock lake. That's a nice little speckled trout that we caught and released. You can see there's no time, and he's perfectly fine.
Now, you say that was about 6 feet of water?
That was in probably 6 feet of water, yeah.
Okay, and it looked, from what I could see anyways, it looked like you could see to the bottom.
Yeah, you can see the bottom pretty well, especially with all the windows shut. And I actually watched that fish swim in, interact with my tube, and eat it. And I set the hook and fought the fish. And another thing about the sight hole is that you can almost flip them into the shack like you're flipping a bass into the boat, because you don't have to worry about the hole. There's no like bumping on the bottom of the hole or getting them turned because you have a big hole. So it's got its advantages, and it's quite exciting.
It definitely would have some advantages. What else? I know, like I said, I know you probably spend more time on the ice than anyone I know. So, what else have you been catching? Okay. Or your family members have been catching?
Yeah, that was my daughter, Sadie. That was her first landlocked salmon that we actually caught in the shack. We were just setting up for shore lunch, but she wanted me to start cooking bacon. So I put a small little rattle trap on a jaw jacker. And just as I was to turn the bacon on, the jaw jacker went off, and she was able to fight the fish on the rod and land her first landlocked salmon, which was quite exciting. And this was on the same body of water, probably 3 years ago. I was on a solo trip, and I drilled 2 holes, one for my transducer and one for my jig. And I dropped my jig down to the bottom in 65 feet of water. And when I went to reel back up, there was nothing but weight. And it was, I hooked that fish at probably 10 o'clock in the morning. And I watched it swim past my hole, which was probably 2 feet apart from my other hole. I could see his head in my jig hole and his tail in the second hole. And it took me 45 minutes to land that fish on 6-pound line.
Oh, and how about through the ice to boot? Now, here's one that a lot of people talk about, but not everybody has targeted.
This is another species that we have here in New Brunswick called burbot, or ling, which is a freshwater cod. And that one there was approximately, I'd say, 6 pounds. And that ate a glow spoon tipped with a minnow, jigged off the bottom. And they put up quite a fight because as eels, they're able to swim backwards. So this one here, we actually were able to release it because they're quite hardy fish. And there's something else to see. They have little barbels on their chins like sturgeon do, and they mainly go by smell. Is how you catch them. So you need like something like a good piece of a bait, and they have very poor eyesight, which is another reason why we use glow spoons. And this one was caught probably mid-afternoon, getting on to the twilight. So that was probably one of my 3 favorite fish caught through the ice.
That's unreal. I mean, let's face it, we've seen perch, we've seen bass, we've seen pickerel, we've seen trout, burbot. There's a pretty crazy number of opportunities out there. Whether you're in New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, you're getting some compliments rolling in on that fish, Nate. I mean, that is definitely a beautiful burbot. That is a species that, I would like to target myself. I've always had the curiosity. I've never heard tell of anyone catching it through the ice or in open water. So that's kind of the spin that I've looked at burbot for. Just a different angle to take it. We've got to call it a show here real soon. Before we do, Ryan Anderson, you wrote a blog for the Fish East website here just a little while ago. Why don't you give us a quick rundown on some safety tips? Because let's face it, if these folks are going to hit the ice, they've got to be coming home safe at the end of the day. So why don't you tell the folks what they need to stay safe out there?
It's a common saying that no fish is worth your life, and it is 100% accurate. Especially this year, we've had a really late ice season. Even now, there's not safe ice in a lot of areas. Some stocked brook trout and some pickerel are not worth your life. Know your ice conditions. Don't just rely on the internet. Don't rely on what some guy said if he was out fishing last week or something. Have a spud bar, which is a big metal bar that you can use to check the ice as you walk out. Have the ice picks. You wear them around your neck and they are there for you, available. Essentially what happens is if you do fall in the water, you can take these ice picks off your neck, and they've got a little metal spike on the bottom of them that you can dig into the ice to help you drag yourself out of the ice. Also keep in mind, if you're not capable of dragging yourself out of a hole that you've fallen through in the ice, those ice picks aren't going to help you. So don't risk your life. If you're going out on some sketchy ice or you're not sure about the conditions, have a friend there, bring some rope if you need it. Honestly, I don't want to tell you about all of the different pieces of equipment you can have to save you if you fall through the ice. The better thing to do is to just not go out if there is any question about the safety of the ice that you're going out on. Make sure you've got a minimum of 4 inches. I know there are people out there who have fished on 2 inches of ice and been fine. But you're taking a risk when you do that. Minimum 4 inches, and that's good solid ice. Even if you're out there on 4 inches, be careful and be aware of the conditions that you're in, because you might have 4 inches on one section of the lake and less than that on another. The most important thing is to just be aware and don't take the risk, and don't let somebody else accept responsibility for your choices. Make your own choice. Make sure you know what your conditions that you're walking out on are, and just be extra careful.
I guess that sums it up. Just be extra careful. Take your 2 feet, your sled, head out on the ice. You don't need to take your truck out there. Yeah, it's great. It's fun. Whatever you want to say it is. But especially in a winter like this one, just don't take any chances. Guys, I can't thank you all enough for someone who someone who knew nothing about ice fishing. I definitely feel like I learned a lot tonight. I really hope that, the folks at home, learned something tonight. Don't ever be shy to ask questions, folks. If you're watching, throw your questions at us. We'll answer them as many as we can. If you want to go back and pick up some information that you might have missed tonight, this show, along with all our other podcasts, are available again through fisheast.com. You'll be able to find this one as of tomorrow. It'll be up there. Ryan, Nate, Figure 8, as always, gentlemen, it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate all the information. And, if COVID ever lets up, we all got to get together for a big gathering and get the Fish East team out on the water, whether it be open water or hard water. I don't care at this point. I just want to get us all together setting some hooks.
Yep. Sounds good, Donnie. And get Matt cooking for us too.
Oh, we may not even let him fish. We'll leave him on shore cooking, and we'll go out and do the fishing. So there. 3 times in one night, Matt. 3 times in one night we've seen that picture. So I think I don't know whether we're gonna make you or your fish tacos famous, but we're working on a little bit of both.
I have to trademark that, maybe. Yeah.
You're gonna, yeah. The I don't know, the Zito taco or
something. I'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Once again, guys, Ryan, Nate, Figure 8, thanks for joining us. Look forward to talking to you guys again real soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Donnie.
Yeah, see you guys.
See you on the ice.
Matt, we're coming to the end of another one. I know that kind of flew by. I mean, I kind of treated you more like a guest than my co-host on that one, because I was just a know nothing who was sitting here asking the questions, and I had to look at you to answer them. So
no, it's all good. We had a great bunch of guys there that know a lot about ice fishing. I mean, Nate, God. That guy's I'm listening to him talking about his Panoptics and all these ways he's fishing. I'm like, oh my God, I am not doing it right. I thought I was doing it right. I'm not doing it right.
He's got a 7-foot long saw that, like I said, it looks like for anyone who's ever watched Star Trek, it looks like a Klingon weapon off of Star Trek.
Mhm.
And he's out there cutting, coffee table size holes and looking down the bottom. Like that's not an 8-inch hole in the ice and waiting to see what pokes its head up through.
I know. Unbelievable. I would love to try it. I got to get up there. Once I need this COVID to go away so I can go up there and catch all these different fish. And you guys got some really, it's more open than it is here in Nova Scotia. Even your regulations are a little bit more relaxed than we have here. Ice fishing here is tough. We're really well regulated, and it's tough. It can be tough here. It can be tough for sure.
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to get to with the guys tonight, Matt, and I didn't get a chance, but I'm going to throw it at you.
Sure.
Ice fishing bucket list. What's on yours?
If we're keeping it like
Maritime.
Maritimes, yeah.
Atlantic.
Yeah, probably Lakers and landlocks. I caught a landlock last year as a bycatch. But I would like to go to a place where I can actually target them and get some nice ones. But Lakers for sure. I've caught everything there is to catch through the ice here. So Lakers is where I would like to try it. And those burbot look kind of cool. I've heard about them out west. I didn't realize you had any in New Brunswick until this year. So
we've got some good size ones too.
Yeah, that'd be great. I've caught everything there is to catch here. I even used to catch a lot of codfish in the Bredora Lakes. That was always fun, catching 5-6 pound codfish through the ice. But Lakers, that's a bucket list for me. I got to do it. I want to do it in open water. I want to do it ice fishing. That's on the list for me.
Well, I know a place for you for the open water stuff. We'll hook that up for sure.
I will be there.
COVID permitting.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of fun again. Like I said, I learned a lot tonight. I'm kind of nursing a bum knee. I'm not sure if I'll get to put any of it to use anytime soon, but I definitely have some information in my head that I didn't have before. So that's always a good thing.
Yeah.
As always, Matt, thanks for joining us.
Always my pleasure.
I look forward to doing this. And guess what? 2 weeks' time, we're going to do it all over again.
That's right.
So, folks, don't forget, every 2 weeks, we're going to be doing these Fish East live podcasts. We love having your questions. We love interacting with with the folks watching at home. And so come back come back in 2 weeks' time and spend some time with us again. On behalf of myself and Matt Zito and all of the Fish East team, thanks for joining us. Fish on and Fish East.